Elisa, go find another table. This one's for family, not for failed poetry publishers. My cousin Serafina's voice rang through the private dining room of the Copley Pillar, Boston's most exclusive old money restaurant. Laughter erupted from my Aunt Brenda, my Uncle Robert, and my other cousin, Julian. I just stood there, my face burning hot with humiliation, clutching my purse. Then the waiter placed the bill directly in front of me. $4,900. That's your contribution. Elisa. Serafina sneered, her voice dripping with malice. I heard your little publishing house finally landed a big contract. Right? I smiled. I took a sip of water, and I humbly placed my credit card in the leather folder to pay for their entire extravagant dinner. But then, I heard a voice cut through the chatter. Just a moment. Please. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Everyone at the table turned. Standing at the far end of the table was my grandmother, Eleanor, at 79. She was a living literary legend. The woman who had built the entire publishing empire my family lived off of. My Aunt Brenda, Eleanor's daughter, huffed with irritation. Mother. We were just about to leave. Eliza already paid the bill. I said. Sit down. Eleanor's voice wasn't loud, but it was cold as steel. Even my Uncle Robert, a man who oozed arrogance, straightened his posture. Eleanor began to walk slowly around the table, her sharp eyes cutting into each family member. I have watched how you treat Eliza for 22 years, she said, her voice steady. Ever since her parents died and I entrusted her to your care. Mother. It was just a joke. Serafina tried to laugh, but the sound died in her throat. A joke? Eleanor stopped directly in front of my Aunt Brenda. You sneer at her publishing house? Lighthouse Press. Calling it a failure. Tell me, Brenda, when was the last time you actually read a book she published? Or are you too busy spending the money my legacy provides? My aunt's face flushed. Eleanor turned to my Uncle Robert. You laugh at poetry. You call it useless. Did you forget that it was useless's things that paid for your house on Beacon Hill? The house I bought? Robert stared at his plate. Hick Asa swept over my cousins. Serafina. Julian. You two were educated at Harvard and Wharton. You drive cars that cost more than most people's homes. Elisa, who has more talent in her little finger than both of you combined, had to take out loans to pay for community college. And I don't recall either of you even showing up to her graduation. She paused, letting the silence suffocate them. And tonight, after all that, you humiliate her in public? And then you make her pay $4,900 for the privilege of your cruelty. Eleanor walked slowly back to her end of the table. The silence in the room was so heavy I could feel it pressing on my chest. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear. I am 79 years old. And lately, I have been thinking a great deal about my legacy. About what I am leaving behind. The entire table was frozen. I could see Serafina and Julian lean forward. Just slightly. Their eyes, which had been full of mockery moments before, were now sharp with greed. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for their entire lives. The current will, Eleanor continued, states that my entire estate, the entire publishing empire, passes to my daughter, Brenda, and is then to be distributed between my grandchildren, Serafina and Julian. A tiny, smug smile flickered across Serafina's face. She looked like she'd already won. But, Eleanor said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a simple, cream-colored envelope. I had my lawyer draft a new will. It was signed and notarized yesterday. Serafina's smile didn't just fade, it froze. Grandmother. What are you saying? You can't do that, Julian blurted out, his voice cracking. Why not? Eleanor raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Because of a joke. I have watched you all treat Eliza as an outcast. As a servant in your own home, I have watched you dismiss her successes and scorn her passion. Tonight, you proved you don't understand the first thing about the value of what I built. She walked over to me, and I flinched. But she just rested her hand on my shoulder. It was light, but I felt the strength in it. Eliza is the only one at this table who understands what my legacy truly is. It's not in the bank accounts. Robert. It's not in the stock portfolio. Julian. It's in the passion. It's in the integrity. It's in the belief that words matter. She looked back at the stunned, pale faces of her family. So, here is what is going to happen. My entire estate. Every single copyright. Every share of stock. Every unpublished manuscript. Will go to Eliza. The explosion was immediate. Are you? Insana Serafina shrieked. Jumping to her feet so fast, her chair screeched against the floor. That's illegal. That is our family's asset. Aunt Brenda burst into tears. Horrible. Gasping sound. Mother. Please. I am your daughter. Your blood. That girl. She isn't even really family. Elisa. Eleanor said. Her voice cutting through the noise like a diamond. Is more family than any of you have ever been. She has earned this. Not through blood. But through character. You're being manipulated. You crazy old woman. Serafina's voice was a high-pitched shriek. Her face blotchy and red. She planned this. That little monster planned all of this. My Aunt Brenda was just sobbing. Clinging to her husband's arm. Mother. Please. She wailed. You're tearing the family apart. Think about what you're doing. I just sat there. Frozen. My mind couldn't catch up. Billions of dollars. The entire Eleanor publishing empire. It felt like a dream. Like words without meaning. I turned to my grandmother. My voice was barely a whisper. Grandmother. I don't understand. Why? Why are you doing this now? Eleanor's gaze, which had been so full of fire, softened as she looked at me. Her hand found mine. Because I'm dying. Elisa. The words hit me harder than the inheritance. It felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Pancreatic cancer, she said. Her voice calm, as if discussing the weather. Stage 4. I have 6 months. Maybe less. I found out 3 months ago. Tears instantly blurred my vision. The one person, the only person in my entire life, who had ever truly seen me, who had ever protected me, was leaving. But my family felt nothing. I heard a sound. A short, ugly bark. Serafina was laughing. See? She yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Eleanor. She's lying. She's using some fake illness to manipulate you. We'll sue. We will get our own doctors. We will prove you aren't mentally competent. Julian was already in the corner, his back to us, shouting into his phone at the family's lawyers. My Uncle Robert tried to play the peacemaker, his voice slick with false concern. Eleanor, let's be reasonable. We can work this out. We can split the estate. Eliza can have a share. Of course. My grandmother squeezed my hand. The decision is made, she said, cutting him off. She pushed her chair back. We're going home. Elisa, we have a lot of work to do. As I stood up, my legs shaking, I asked the one question that was burning in my mind. Grandmother, if you knew, why did you wait so long? Why did you let them? She stopped and turned to look at me. Her eyes filled with a profound sadness I had never seen before. I've been silent for too long, she said, her voice low. Do you know what the greatest pain of a parent is? Eliza, it's hoping your child will change. And being disappointed. Every single day. I kept hoping Brenda, my daughter, would see your worth. That she would honor the legacy I built. But I was wrong. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I let her and her family stain everything I worked for with their greed. This illness. It's not a curse. My dear. It was just a deadline. It was the final bell. Forcing me to do what I should have done years ago. I cannot die knowing my life's work will fall into the hands of people who despise its very soul. We walked out of the room, leaving them all standing there in stunned, furious silence. As the door closed, I heard Serafina's voice one last time. Hello? Vicious promise. You will never see a penny of that money. You be times H. I moved into Eleanor's Beacon Hill estate that night. The quiet hallways, lined with first editions, felt like a sanctuary compared to the life I'd known. My phone, however, was a war zone. It exploded with calls and texts from Serafina and Julian, each one more vulgar and threatening than the last. Walter, Eleanor's attorney, met us in the library. He was kind, but all business. He explained that Eleanor had activated a $5 million trust fund for my immediate use. To protect yourself, Miss Eliza, he said, and to ensure Lighthouse Press is secure. He wasn't wrong. As predicted, Serafina had leaked the story to the tabloids. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Literary legend Eleanor, manipulated by poetry niece. Family disinherited. The online comments were brutal. Obvious gold digger. She waited until the old woman was dying, and then made her move. That little poetry press is just a cover she used to get close to the money. My Aunt Brenda and Uncle Robert filed the official lawsuit 2 days later, claiming diminished capacity and undue influence. Serafina, acting as their counsel, immediately hired a private investigator. New stories started popping up. Planted whispers that I had failed out of community college, I graduated with honors, that my publishing house was drowning in debt, it was finally turning a profit, and that I had been preying on Eleanor for years. Eleanor, who seemed weaker after the confrontation at the restaurant, sat with me in the study. A blanket over her lap. She held my hand. Her grip surprisingly firm. They want to break you, Elisa, she said. Her voice quiet, but fierce. They want to paint you as guilty, as weak, as a manipulator. So the world believes their lie. Do not give them the satisfaction. Reading those words, gold digger, manipulator, a part of me, a small, dark part, actually felt guilty. That's what they wanted. I kept thinking about that night. About the bill. Why did I agree to pay it? Why did I just sit there and take the humiliation? And then I realized it was the endurance trap. For 22 years, they had trained me to believe that silence was survival, that accepting their casual cruelty was the price I had to pay for a few scraps of a fake family. That $4,900 bill wasn't weakness. It was a conditioned reflex. One they had spent 2 decades perfecting. But when Eleanor stood up, that reflex was broken. It was shattered, and it was never coming back. The smear campaign was one thing, but Eleanor and Walter were preparing for the real battle. A few days later, they called me into the library for an emergency meeting. Eleanor looked exhausted. The fight was clearly taking a toll on her, but her eyes were still sharp. Elisa, she said, her voice quiet. We need to talk about your mother. Evelyn. I tensed. I barely remembered my mother, who was Aunt Brenda's younger sister. She and my father had died in a car crash when I was 6. I remember her, I said. You all told me she was a poet, too, but that she wasn't very successful. They lied, Eleanor said flatly. She pushed a worn, leather-bound folder across the mahogany desk. I opened it. Inside was an old publishing contract, signed by my mother, Evelyn, and my grandmother, Eleanor, and attached to it were bank records, trust fund documents. Your mother, Eleanor said, her voice filling with a rare warmth, was extraordinary. Just before she and your father died, I read her first manuscript. It was brilliant. I signed her immediately. My hands were shaking as I read the documents. When Evelyn died, Eleanor continued, her voice turning to ice, the rights to her work and the royalty trust we established were transferred to her legal guardians, to your Aunt Brenda and your Uncle Robert. My eyes found the number on the page. A trust fund, a royalty trust fund, established for my care, for $900,000. They took it all. Elisa, Eleanor said. Every last cent. They spent it on Serafina's private school, on Julian's investment fund, on their vacations to Europe. They buried your mother's work, let it go out of print, and spent her legacy on their own children. All while telling you that you were the burden. The air left my lungs. It was so much worse than the dinner. So much worse than the insults. It wasn't just cruelty. It was theft. They hadn't just mocked my passion for poetry, they had paid for their lives by stealing my mother's. The irony was so bitter. It choked me. All those years. Serafina laughing at my pointless poetry degree. Julian calling my publishing house a charity case. They were living on stolen poetry money. As that devastating truth settled in, my phone buzzed on the table. It was Uncle Robert. Eleanor locked her eyes on mine and nodded. Answer it. Put it on speaker. I pressed the button. Robert's voice filled the room. Slick with false desperation. Elisa, Elisa. Please. You have to talk to your grandmother. You have to make her see reason. She's not thinking clearly. I took a deep breath. The voice that came out of me wasn't mine. It was cold. It was steady. It was final. She is thinking perfectly clearly. Uncle Robert. I said. Just as clearly as you were when you drained my mother's $900,000 royalty trust. There was nothing. Just dead. Cold silence on the other end of the line. I heard a faint, sharp gasp, Aunt Brenda in the background. They hung up. Instead of waiting for the lawsuit to play out, Eleanor decided to strike first. She scheduled a press conference at the headquarters of her publishing house. She sat in a wheelchair, looking frail but utterly unbreakable. Walter, her attorney, stood beside her. I sat on her other side. My hands clasped so tightly, my knuckles were white. The room was packed with cameras and reporters, all of them buzzing with anticipation. Eleanor didn't waste time. Walter presented everything. The medical evaluations from 3 separate, respected doctors, all confirming Eleanor was of sound mind and body, apart from her illness. He presented the financial records detailing the years of abuse, the disparity in spending between me and my cousins. And then, he presented the stolen royalty trust, the $900,000. Then, Eleanor gestured to me. Eliza would like to say a few words. My mouth was dry. Every camera turned to me. I could see the skepticism in their eyes. My family, I said, my voice shaking, but finding its strength, has spent the last few weeks telling the world I am a gold digger, that my passion, Lighthouse Press, is a failure and a sham. I used to get close to my grandmother. I looked directly into the main camera. They said this while they were secretly living off the profits of my mother's stolen poetry. They called my passion worthless, while spending the $900,000 her passion earned. I am not here to fight for money. I am here to reclaim my mother's legacy. And my grandmother's. It was then that the doors at the back of the conference room burst open. Serafina and my Aunt Brenda stormed in, their faces twisted with rage. It's all lies, she's brainwashed all of you, Serafina screamed. Every camera swiveled to her, capturing the pure, unhinged panic on her face. A reporter near the front, smelling blood, shouted out, Miss Serafina, what's your comment on the allegation your family misappropriated $900,000 in royalties meant for your cousin? Serafina, in her narcissistic rage, lost all control. She walked right into the trap. Misappropriated. She spat the word. My mother had to raise that ungrateful brat for 22 years. That money was payment. It was the cost of putting up with her. The entire room went dead silent. You could hear nothing but the rapid-fire click, click, click of dozens of cameras flashing, capturing the moment of her confession. Serafina's face went white. She had just admitted to the theft and the motive in front of the entire world. The court hearing after that was just a formality. The video of Serafina's meltdown went viral, viewed over 10 million times. The judge dismissed my family's lawsuit to contest the will in under 10 minutes. She ruled that Eleanor's new will was ironclad and valid. And then she addressed the stolen trust. The judge ordered Brenda and Robert to pay back the full $900,000, plus 22 years of compound interest. The total judgment against them was nearly $2.5 million. In the courtroom, Aunt Brenda collapsed, sobbing. Uncle Robert just stared forward, looking like a ghost. Eleanor squeezed my hand. It's done, sweetheart, she whispered. You're free. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep a few weeks later. We spent those last weeks together, not talking about the lawsuit, but reading my mother's manuscripts. My family's downfall was swift, brutal, and total. Unable to pay the $2.5 million judgment, Brenda and Robert were forced into bankruptcy. They lost the Beacon Hill house. They lost everything. A few months later, the district attorney filed criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. They were both found guilty. Serafina's public on-camera confession and unethical behavior got her permanently disbarred. Julian, tied to the family's financial disgrace, was fired from his investment fund. I took control of Eleanor's empire. And I did two things. First, I didn't close Lighthouse Press. Instead, I used the new resources to relaunch it as the Evelyn Legacy Foundation, the largest grant-providing foundation in the country for young and overlooked poets. Second, I published my mother's collection of poetry. It became an international bestseller within 6 months. Last week, I got an email. It was from Serafina. Elisa. It read, I know we had our differences, but we are still family. I'm struggling. You can't possibly need all that money. Can't you find it in your heart to help me? Just a little. I stared at the message. I thought about the dining room at the Copley Pillar. I thought about the laughter. I thought about the $4,900 bill. And I hit delete. They say blood is forever. But they're wrong. There are some relationships so toxic they will poison your entire life, unless you save yourself. Making the decision to cut them off isn't cruelty. It's the final, necessary act of self-preservation. You don't owe someone your entire life just because they raised you in contempt. Family isn't something you owe. It's something you deserve. And sometimes, to find yourself, to build a true legacy, you have to be willing to let go of blood. Do you think I did the right thing? Have you ever had to make a hard choice to protect your own peace? Share your story down in the comments.